name is David. I live in a small town in the Midwest that no one has ever heard of. The kind of place that if you're driving through and blink, you'll probably miss it. I often walk around town out of boredom when being inside too long playing video games and reading grows tiresome. It's really all I do during summer vacation. I don't have many friends here, except Justin, and he is always out of town hanging out with his girlfriend now. I myself don't have a girlfriend, though I wish I did. Her name is Angela. She also lives here in town, and sometimes I see her out walking her dog. We are both in the same grade. I've known her for a long time. We used to play together as kids, but now I'm pretty sure she doesn't know I exist. I've always wanted to ask her out, but I've been too shy to even approach her. One day, after a small family outing to have dinner with my parents at a local restaurant, I saw Angela out walking her dog near the small park on the outskirts of town. I didn't live too far from there, so I thought if I hurried after we got back home, I could make my way to the park. I'm not sure what I would say if I did happen to run into her there, but I didn't let that stop me. I knew I had to at least try, if she was ever going to know how I felt about her. And at least we had some sort of history together, even if it felt like that was eons ago. By the time I got to the park, a dark overcast had formed in the sky. It was later in the evening now, and only an hour or so from being dark. I walked around aimlessly through the park, trying to see if I could spot Angela or her dog, but I didn't see a soul. I was about to give up and just head back home when I started to hear a dog barking in the distance. Though it didn't seem too far away, it wasn't coming from inside the park. Just through the tree line on the outer edges of the park was a network of trails. I've only been on them a few times before. Once a few summers back, me and some of my cousins had a paintball fight in the woods there that ended pretty abruptly. I had shot my cousin Nathan just above his collarbone that ended in him crying and running home to my parents. Needless to say, my parents confiscated all of my gear, and that was the end of me having any fun in those woods. So now I had made my way back across the park to the tree line. The dog was barking much more frantically now. I looked around the edge of the woods and finally spotted a trailhead, although it was quite overgrown now. I called out to the dog several times to get its attention. I assumed it was Angela's dog, a fairly large German Shepherd. I didn't know its name. By now the wind had kicked up quite a bit. It was starting to rain slightly. I worked up some nerve and headed down the path into the woods. Once I entered into the woods, the dog had stopped barking. I went down the trail a little ways and started to call out to the dog again. I didn't hear anything besides the wind and the rain. It had started to really come down now. The temperature had also dropped considerably. My clothes were becoming soaked, and I was starting to feel a chill down to my bones. At this point, I was on the verge of giving up on the dog. I turned around and started back to the park. That's when I heard a faint whimpering. I immediately turned around and saw our German Shepherd not too far from where I was on the trail. Its head was down, and it was shivering. I slowly started to approach it, calling out, "It's okay, dog. Come here. Come on." I was probably about 10 feet from her when she stood up and started growling, baring her teeth. My heart started to race. This was no small dog. Just then it sprang up and right at me. I turned to run as fast as I could. I headed down the trail, but it was almost completely dark now, and the trail was hard to see. It was so overgrown and narrow. I ran and ran, trying to avoid the countless trees. I could feel countless spider webs catching my face. Thorns were cutting into my sides and arms. After running for quite some time, I turned to face the dog, but there was nothing there. I stooped over to catch my breath. I was completely soaked. My clothes were saturated and very heavy now. I must have run 100 yards, and what direction, I had no clue. It was completely dark now. After calming down, I grabbed a large branch to protect myself if the dog should show up again. I started back in the direction I had come, at least I thought it to be, when I suddenly heard Angela yelling for help. I yelled back, "Where are you?" She didn't answer. She just kept yelling for help. Her voice seemed to be growing fainter and fainter. I told her to hold on. I had a pretty good idea where the trail was, and just to stay put, I would come to her. I pulled out my cell phone. Luckily it was still working, even though it was wet. I turned on my flashlight and nearly screamed at what I saw. I had ticks crawling all over me, my arms, my shirt. I started to feel them on my neck. I brushed away at them violently. I hated ticks. This was like my worst nightmare. I quickly started moving in the direction I thought I heard her voice coming from. I must have come under a nest of ticks. I called out to Angela again. No response. Again I called out to her, louder this time. Nothing. After moving in that direction for a while, I knew I had to be close to where she had called out to me before. I shined my flashlight in every direction. I couldn't see anything but trees. A little further on, I stopped and shined my light again. To my left, I spotted a small clearing in the woods, maybe 10 yards up. I headed in that direction, and then I heard the same distinct growling I heard before, coming from behind me. I started quickly to run to that clearing, as fast as I could, dropping my cell phone in a panic. And then suddenly I tripped, falling over. I woke up what I believed to be many hours later. I had a terrible pounding in my head. It was pouring down rain still. I was shivering horribly. I reached up and touched my head. I put my finger into my mouth and tasted blood. I was in agony. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I sat myself up slowly, feeling very dizzy while doing so. That's when there was a great lightning flash across the sky, illuminating the clearing I was in for just a brief second or two, long enough to see what I thought I saw. Just in front of me was a pentagram, formed by stones, in an almost perfect circle. Just beyond that was what looked like could be caution tape surrounding a possible altar of some kind. I tried to erase the image from my mind. That couldn't be real. I didn't just see that. And then I heard a thunder booming above me, followed by another brief lightning flash, confirming what I saw before was quite real. I slowly stood up, turning around, when I felt something put its hand on my shoulder. The hairs on my neck instantly shot up, and then I felt a terribly evil presence that swarmed all around me. I felt instantly nauseous. I didn't think I could feel any more chilled until I heard the voice whisper into my right ear, and what felt like a very long tongue enter my ear canal. I immediately swung at the air. I wasn't very religious. I had gone to Sunday school with my parents as a child, but I was crying out to God to save me. I made my way through the woods at a quick pace, but not too fast this time. I was in survival mode. I finally made it outside the woods to a cornfield. I followed the outside edge of the field until I made it to a road. I recognized this road. I made it home from there easily. I told the story to my parents, but they weren't convinced. They most likely suspected drug use. After getting myself cleaned up, I had my parents drive me over to Angela's house. I wanted to make sure she was home safe with her dog. Her parents answered the door. They told me she wasn't home. In fact, she hadn't been in town for over a week. She was on a road trip with some of her friends.